Hello. Hello, police. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Graham Parkins and David Lederman had made convincing cases for the innocence of their clients. If Steele and Wombs were truly the victims of a cruel fantasy created by Darren Nicholls, if the evidence against them had been concocted, dreamed up and falsified with the help of the Essex police, if the lack of forensic and other evidence of their guilt was purely down to the fact that they had no guilt at all, it left only one question. If Steele and Wombs had not murdered Tate, Tucker and Rolfe, then who did? As the weeks had passed, the defence had offered up some tantalising possibilities without ever spelling out the allegations fully. It had emerged, for example, that the shotgun cartridges used in the murder were a type popular with clay pigeon shooters. DC Jim, who had been heard on tape discussing with Nicholls ways of ripping Steele off by stealing his Jaguar while it was carrying £150,000, was a regular clay pigeon shooter. Jim was now under arrest. The implication was obvious. The mysterious brothers from whom Tate had supposedly borrowed £40,000 were vaguely touted as another possibility, as were literally dozens of other members of the Essex and London underworld. But it wasn't until early December, when the trial was in its 4th month, that a full, practical and detailed alternative explanation for the deaths came to court. And when it did, it was absolute dynamite. No one expected much the day that William George Jasper took the stand. A shaven-headed, square-shouldered bruiser of an East End hardman, he spoke mostly in sentences of 5 words or less, in a sullen, monotone voice. But as his incredible story unfolded, the entire courtroom ended up hanging on his every syllable. Jasper had been arrested on theft and drugs charges on the 16th of January 1996, a little more than a month after the murders. During his initial interviews at Rayleigh Police Station, he said little, but after a few hours he began to relate the tale of the 5 large ones he had earned for a bit of driving he had done the month before. The saga began in a Mexican restaurant in Canning Town in the middle of December. Jasper, along with 2 leading members of an East End crime syndicate, were discussing what to do about a gang from Essex who had arranged to purchase some cocaine. The word on the street was that the Essex boys were not planning to hand over any cash, but instead bought a machine gun and were planning to rip off the London team. The Essex firm in question was, of course, none other than Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. The East End gang was run by Jesse Gale, and a man known only as Mr. D. For Gale, the discussion had a personal element. He had been ripped off by Tucker before, to the tune of £20,000, and there was no way he was going to let it happen again. As the beers flowed and the enchiladas went down, so the conversation got more serious. "Why don't we rob them?" said Gale. Mr. D shook his head. "We can't do that. There would be too many comebacks. We'd be better off taking them out of the game, putting them out of their misery." Now it was Gale's turn to shake his head. "Nah, just rob them," he said. Mr. D then turned to Jasper and asked if he wanted to earn £5,000 for a night's driving. On the evening of the 6th of December 1995, the night of the murder, Jasper picked up a grey Fiat Uno Turbo from outside the Peacock Gym in East London. He drove to a bar near Hornchurch where he picked up Mr. D, who was carrying a sports bag. Jasper soon learned the bag contained a sawn-off shotgun and a 9mm Browning pistol. From there, the pair travelled to a cab office where they found Jesse Gale waiting outside. Jasper waited in the car while Mr. D got out, taking the bag with him, and disappeared with Gale down an alleyway. 10 minutes or so later, Mr. D returned and told Jasper to drive him to Rettendon. pulling up alongside a lane close to a garden centre. Mr. D got out, again with the bag, and told Jasper he was going to pick up 4 kilos of cocaine. He returned around 40 minutes later carrying the sports bag and also a foot-square rucksack. As the pair drove back to London, Mr. D called Jesse Gale and told him everything was sorted. It was only when he saw the news of the murders the following day that he realised what had happened. He had already arranged to meet Jesse Gale the following evening at Morton's bar in order to pick up his fee, and he turned up just before 10 p.m. I thought they were just going to do a deal, but somewhere along the line they changed their mind. When I got to Morton's bar the next night, Gale was already there. He asked me what I wanted to drink. I said JD and Coke, and he got me a large one. I had a couple of mouthfuls, and then he said he was going to the toilet and for me to follow him in a couple of minutes. I found him in a cubicle cutting up some cocaine. I had a couple of snorts, then he gave me the money, and I said something like, "You took them out of the game." He gave me a little grin, a smirk, and said, "Don't ask questions, what are you, a cozzer?" And that was my intro to shut up. Jasper's testimony seemed to be the final piece in the jigsaw as far as the defence were concerned. They had surely proved beyond doubt that Darren Nicholls was a liar. He had admitted as much himself. That Steele and Womes had solid alibis for where they were and what they were doing the night that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe had died. They had also provided a highly convincing alternative explanation of how the men met their death. In the public gallery, relatives of the family of Jack Womes were starting to feel confident that things would go their way, while the relatives of the dead men were starting to shuffle around uneasily. "The whole case has been unnerving for all the family," said Marie Tate, but Billy Jasper's evidence was the most unnerving of all. They were not the only ones suffering. Darren Nicholls' wife states, "While the trial was going on, Darren was completely impossible to live with. He never actually got violent with me or the kids, but there were loads of times when I really thought he was about to. Every now and then, for no reason, he'd suddenly get really angry about something really stupid and storm off or try to smash something up. He'd never been like that before. The stress was clearly getting to him, but he point blank refused to talk about it, not to anyone, so it all just bottled up inside him. When it came out, it was terrifying. More than once I thought about running away, but the threat to take my kids away always held me back. When you're in a couple, I always think the most important thing is to be able to talk about the future, whether it's what you want to be doing in 5 years' time or where you're going on holiday. You always have to have something to look forward to or know where you're going. At the moment, we couldn't do that. We had no idea what the future held. It all depended on which way the trial went. I remember I couldn't even bring myself to think about what might happen if they actually got off. I'd never been so unhappy in all my life. When you sign up for the Witness Protection Programme, they try to tell you what to expect, but it never comes close to the truth. It does nothing to prepare you for what it's really going to be like. I guess if they actually told you exactly how difficult it was, how little money you'd have to live on, how often you'd be separated and how much your family relationships and friendships would suffer, then nobody would ever want to get involved. If Darren had asked me what to do at the time, I would have told him to go for it, to sign up just the way he did. Now, looking back, I'm not at all sure. You've been listening to Blogs 19, written by Tony Thompson. This book is available to purchase online at Amazon and other online book retailers. Many thanks for joining me for this video. Very shortly you'll be able to see some other videos from the channel, including the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video. Take care. Cheers.